Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a story that honestly feels like a movie plot, but I promise you every single detail is absolutely real. We're talking about the ancient Egyptian city of Heracleion. Now, you might be wondering, why should we care about a city that's been underwater for thousands of years? Well, it's not just some dusty history lesson. It's an incredible real-world warning about how fast nature can wipe out an entire empire. It's kind of like the myth of Atlantis, but rooted entirely in reality. For centuries, this place was just a ghost, literally just a name whispered in ancient texts. Historians had no clue where it was. But, as we're going to see, it left behind a staggering legacy that's finally coming to light.
Okay, I want you to picture this. Imagine you're a diver, slowly descending through the freezing, pitch-black water of the Mediterranean. Your eyes adjust, and suddenly, massive shapes start looming out of the gloom. You're not looking at a coral reef, You're face-to-face with enormous, meticulously carved stone statues, just resting in the silence on the seafloor. There are towering, ancient columns totally covered in marine life, chunks of hieroglyphics, and massive stone blocks from sunken temples. It's just eerie, a perfectly silent, frozen underwater world right where a bustling metropolis used to be.
So, seeing all that leads to one massive question. How does an entire ancient city disappear beneath the sea? We aren't talking about legends here. There's no Atlantis magic at play. We're talking about the very real ancient city of Thonis-Heracleion. This was a place that thrived, held unbelievable power, and then just vanished. Poof. To wrap our heads around this crazy geological and historical mystery, we've got to rewind the clock and see what this place looked like before the water took over. All right, let's dive into this, literally. Section 1, Gateway to Ancient Egypt, the Rise of a Mediterranean Powerhouse. What's super fascinating here is that this city kind of lived a double life. For hundreds of years, historians only knew about it from old texts. And get this, they actually thought they were reading about two entirely different cities. To the Egyptians, it was Thonis, but the Greeks, who were always visiting and trading there, called it Heracleion. So it wasn't just a translation mix-up. It was proof that this place was a massive melting pot. It was exactly where two ancient cultural superpowers collided and traded ideas. And its location? Absolutely crucial. It sat right near the canopic mouth of the Nile, over in the western Nile Delta. Basically, geography was destiny for this place. Thonis-Heracleion was the literal gatekeeper to one of the most important entrances into Egypt from the Mediterranean. If you were a merchant wanting to get into Egypt to make your fortune, you were going through here. No exceptions.
So yeah, this was definitely not some sleepy little fishing village. Its strategic grip was undeniable. It completely controlled access to the Nile, operating as a wildly wealthy trade center and a super strict customs hub, where they taxed everything coming in. Before Alexandria was even a glimmer in history's eye, Thonis-Heracleion was the undisputed maritime boss of the region. Moving right along to Section 2, a vibrant cultural crossroads where Egypt met the Mediterranean. It's honestly mind-boggling to contrast that silent underwater graveyard we just talked about with the sheer chaos of what this city used to be at its peak. Just imagine the noise. A deafening, bustling harbor, absolutely packed with ships from all over the known world. The streets and canals would have been jammed with Egyptian officials, Greek traders yelling prices, sailors, priests, you name it. There were interconnected waterways, enormous stone docks, and warehouses practically bursting with goods. Egypt was building deep ties with Greek settlers, and Thonis-Heracleion was right at the beating heart of it all.
But it wasn't just all about the money and trade. Religion was a massive deal here, especially the incredible temple of Amun-Gareb. The stuff archaeologists have pulled from the water is just staggering. It proves the monumental scale of their religious life. Think about the pure engineering muscle it took to carve colossal statues out of solid rock, right on the water's edge. We're talking huge monuments and ritual objects that link the city directly to Egyptian kingship. The pharaohs themselves were deeply involved in the ceremonies here. So massive wealth, intense faith, and giant stone architecture.
Which makes the fact that it got wiped off the map incredibly spooky. Section 3, the science of sinking, a geological disaster. So we're back to that huge, burning question. What on earth could force a city built of solid rock to just sink into the Mediterranean? Now, we know the city was still important late into ancient Egyptian history. And sure, when Alexandria popped up next door, the political power definitely shifted. But Thonis-Heracleion didn't just vanish because Alexandria stole its thunder. No, it was literally swallowed by the environment.
And just to be clear, geologists don't think this was some ancient curse or a sudden overnight cataclysm. It was a victim of a really messy, gradual cocktail of environmental disasters. The Nile Delta's geography is notoriously tricky. The ground is just packed with waterlogged sediment and soft clay, which is super unstable. So, over the centuries, the city suffered from land subsidence, where the ground basically just slowly sinks lower than sea level. Toss in heavy river flooding, steadily rising sea levels, and severe earthquakes, you've got the ultimate recipe for a geological nightmare. Now, all of this builds up to a frankly terrifying geological phenomenon called soil liquefaction. Seriously, this is wild. When a big earthquake hits, all that intense shaking causes the water-soaked ground, like that soft clay under the city, to just lose its structural integrity. For a short, catastrophic moment, solid Earth literally stops acting like solid Earth and behaves exactly like liquid mud.
Let's walk through exactly how this doomed the city. Step 1. A massive earthquake rocks the Nile Delta. Step 2. All that waterlogged sediment underneath the streets instantly loses its strength. Step 3. The ground effectively turns into soup. And finally, step 4. Well, remember those ridiculously heavy, colossal stone temples and statues we talked about? Suddenly, they have zero foundation. The earth literally opens up and they sink straight down under their own immense weight. It's not magic, it's just physics, a brutally destructive, completely scientific process.
Which leads us to our final part today. Section 4, Preserved in the Deep, the Underwater Time Capsule.
You'd think an entire city going underwater would just be completely destroyed, right? But nature is funny that way. The massive stone monuments, they survive the water easily. And get this, wood, which usually rots away, actually survived because it was trapped deep in oxygen-deprived mud. Sure, metal's corroded, but archaeologists can still totally recognize them. The city wasn't destroyed when it sank. It was actually entombed, safe and sound.
And for centuries, Thonis-Heracleion just sat there in the dark, absolutely silent. Those giant statues grew thick coats of marine life. The sprawling temples and those busy docks were gently buried under thick layers of protective seabed sand. It was perfectly preserved, but out of sight meant out of mind. As the years turned into centuries, the physical reality of the city slipped right out of human memory. It turned into a literal ghost story, a myth that scholars argued about but nobody could actually find.
Which leaves us with one incredibly huge, lingering question. If Heracleion vanished beneath the waves and was buried in mud for over 1,000 years, how did anyone actually manage to find it again? Down there in the dark Mediterranean, this lost city was just waiting, holding on to its secrets and its treasures. It took the invention of modern underwater archaeology to completely change the game and turn this mythical ghost town into the ultimate time capsule of ancient Egypt. But what exactly those divers saw when their flashlights finally cut through the darkness and hit those ruins? Well, you'll just have to wait for part 2 to find out.
For centuries, Heracleion was basically a ghost. It existed only as a whisper in ancient texts. That is, until divers plunged into the Mediterranean and literally found the city just waiting for them. So let's jump right into this and pick up the trail of our lost city. We're looking at one of the most mind-blowing archaeological rediscoveries of our lifetime, taking a myth and turning it into a tangible, physical reality we can actually explore today.
Now you might be wondering, how exactly does an entire, massive maritime hub just vanish? Well, to understand that, we first have to look at where researchers eventually found it. This was a mystery that took decades to crack, and it required looking way beyond the usual desert sands and pointing our attention straight into the water.
Turns out, the ruins were hiding right there, waiting beneath the Mediterranean Sea near the modern Egyptian coast, specifically, right around the area of the former Canopic branch of the Nile. It's just wild to think about, isn't it? An entire bustling metropolis sitting quietly underwater for centuries while the modern world completely carried on above it, just waiting to be found.
Section 1. The Modern Search, Finding the Lost City.
The sheer scale of technology required to pull this off was absolutely unprecedented. Underwater archaeologist Frank Gardio and his team at the European Institute of Underwater Archaeology basically revolutionized the game here. They deployed cutting-edge sonar and magnetometers to map the hidden landscape, pairing all of that with highly advanced diving tech. They weren't just swimming around hoping to spot a random pillar, This was a highly technical, completely systematic archaeological survey.
Uncovering the city wasn't some sudden, dramatic movie moment where a temple magically appeared through the water. Not at all. It was a grueling, highly methodical 4-step process. First, charting the seafloor through mapping, then careful excavation, followed by intense, painstaking documentation, and finally interpretation. That precise sequence is exactly what turns a sunken object from a cool find into a verified historical revelation.
And the harsh reality of underwater archaeology? It literally cannot be overstated. Try moving through layers of seawater and thick sediment. It's incredibly difficult. We're talking limited visibility in super murky water, shifting currents that constantly move sediment around, and objects buried deep under thick mud and sand. Every single architectural fragment, every ceramic piece has to be painstakingly documented in its exact archaeological context before anyone even thinks about moving it.
Section 2. Underwater Clues. Decoding the Depths.
Down there in the dark, divers were met with colossal statues of Egyptian deities and rulers. We're talking enormous stone blocks, massive architectural fragments, and huge columns recovered from the deep. These monumental statues instantly shifted our whole understanding of Heracleion's political scale and its vast religious importance. We are definitely not exaggerating their size. These are massive, undeniable testaments to the city's raw power. They also uncovered absolutely crucial evidence connected to the major temple of Amun-Gareb. This was the religious heartbeat of the city. By pulling up vital inscriptions, ritual objects, statues, and architectural remains, researchers are actively piecing together exactly how ancient Egyptian religious ceremonies functioned, and just how central this temple complex was to their whole society.
Now, the stele of Thonis-Heracleion is a real game changer. It's a vital, bilingual, inscribed monument. And let me tell you, inscriptions are absolute gold for archaeologists. This specific stele provided the definitive textual proof, giving us specific names, titles, and administrative details that physically linked the underwater ruins to the ancient writings we already knew. It hit the nail right on the head.
Section 3. Everyday Life. Breathing life into the ruins.
But researchers didn't just find giant monuments. They discovered everyday items too. Pottery, coins, tools, jewelry, personal items, even ship anchors. Now, it's important to note, we don't call these everyday objects treasure just because they're materially valuable. They're valuable because of the stories they tell us. Looking at these items lets us vividly picture merchants negotiating trades, sailors rigging up their ships, priests prepping for ceremonies, and officials collecting taxes. It reveals this incredibly thriving center of Mediterranean trade and Greek-Egyptian interaction.
Section 4. The Disappearance. Solving the Mystery.
So what does this all mean for its final days? Why did Heracleion sink? We know a whole city doesn't just vanish by magic or some supernatural event. To understand its demise, we have to look straight at the hard geological and environmental evidence.
Researchers actually believe the city's disappearance wasn't caused by one single movie-style catastrophic event. Instead, it was a compounding series of factors over time. Think about land subsidence causing a gradual sinking, seismic instability from earthquakes constantly shaking the foundation, and soil liquefaction, where the solid ground literally behaves like liquid under pressure. Combine all that with flooding and rising Mediterranean waters. The exact timeline is still being pieced together, but it was for sure a brutal combination of these repeated environmental blows that ultimately took the city down.
But here's the wild part. There's actually a strange advantage to all this, and it's underwater preservation. Ironically, sinking into the sea was arguably the best thing that could have happened for the city's legacy. That thick sediment protected the stone architecture from centuries of human destruction and surface-level disturbances, and those waterlogged conditions, they actually preserved organic materials that would have completely rotted away otherwise. It basically gave us this perfect, unusual snapshot of the ancient environment right at the tail end of ancient Egypt.
Section 5. Myth versus reality. The historical facts.
When we compare Heracleion to something like Atlantis, the difference is totally night and day. Heracleion is a historically and archaeologically documented physical city, complete with hard evidence of Greek-Egyptian trade, administration, and maritime tech. Atlantis, on the other hand, is a legendary philosophical island described by Plato with absolutely zero archaeological backing. We have to make a super clear distinction here. While both stories involve a place swallowed by the sea, Heracleion is a proven reality. Archaeology literally turned a mysterious name from ancient texts into a physical landscape. Which brings us to our final verdict. How did Egypt's lost city disappear? Geological instability. Was Heracleion real? Absolutely. I'll leave you with this final, powerful truth from our source that perfectly sums up why this real-world discovery is so much more important than any myth. Heracleion was not swallowed by myth. It was swallowed by the landscape itself.
For centuries, its streets were forgotten, its temples disappeared, and its name faded from memory. But beneath the Mediterranean, the evidence remained. Today, every statue, inscription, anchor, and stone recovered from the seabed gives us another glimpse into a world that once stood at the crossroads of ancient Egypt and the Mediterranean. The lost city was never truly lost. We just had to learn where to look. Which really begs the question, how many other mythical cities are just sitting under the sediment right now, waiting for our technology to catch up with our legends? This has been Mystery Vault. Keep questioning history.